Hey, hello and welcome back to the She Who Dares Wins podcast. And my guest today is Kellye. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hey, y'all.
Oh, I love that. All right, we've got to do an introduction, but I'll start the same as I start with everyone. She Who Dares Wins. Can you tell me how you've dared and won?
Right. Yeah. I guess in the context of this podcast, it would be leaving my career of nearly 20 years of being a physicist and deciding to be self-employed. And initially, that was making furniture. And then I pivoted from that to doing full-time the very niche type of embroidery and tailoring in a kind of Western wear tradition, but with my training, which was Savile Row techniques.
So much to unpack. All right, take me, because I know a little bit about your story, so we've had a wonderful chat beforehand. Take me back to the start, I guess. So a little bit about kind of where you grew up and then how you got into the education system, and then, yeah, take us on a journey.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Texas. I was lived on a farm, like a working farm, where we grew cattle feed, and so everyone was kind of part of the cog of the farm mechanism. We all worked, building things, fixing things, and kind of I lived in that way until maybe my kind of early teens, and then moved to the suburbs and kind of got into music and all that other stuff.
Were you always creative when you were young?
I think, it was, again, in this very structured way where it was like sort of mechanically, like looking at where, again, things were broken and needed fixing and being able to kind of look at a machine and then go, okay, this part needs to go here or whatever. And, again, because it was this kind of farm mentality, and we were allowed to have hobbies as kids, but they always had to kind of be productive. So I was always doing hand embroidery and cross stitch, and kind of weirdly, I had a sewing machine in my bedroom, which I think was just there for storage, like one of these old, like built into a table, Singer sewing machines. And just again, because of the same thing, I was like, oh, there's a machine in here. I don't need to know how it works, and sort of taught myself how to use it when I was very young. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot because we had...
No, this is first time for everyone else, yeah, and I'm still intrigued, so.
And just kind of was like, doing that from as long as I can remember. Like, I can't remember a time when I wasn't able to sort of make things with the sewing machine or do like hand embroidery. And then, was in the normal public school system and had a affinity and luckily sort of aptitude for math and science, and so that was where I started putting my focus. And then because of that, I did pretty well. I was recruited onto a program where they take kids who are good at math and science in Texas and put them in university a couple years early. So I went to university when I was 16, which was the start of my career in physics. And that was in 1998, so a long time ago.
But 16, so like that shocked me because it is such a young age. So the normal age in America to go is what, 21? Is it the same as 18? So it's the same as here. Yeah, so 16 going in, and you said it was quite controlled because they had to pretty much act as your parent.
That's right,
such.
yeah. So I went to a normal university, but we lived in a dorm that was just these kids. So there were 200 each year that they would choose for this program. And so we had normal university classes with university students who were of normal age, but we had curfews and we had rules, like you couldn't smoke and you couldn't drink and you couldn't go into like the club district of the town that I went to university in. And so it was, in one way, a normal university experience, and then in another way quite different.
How do you feel about that now? Do you feel like, is there any regrets that you didn't have kind of the normal, or did you just because you lived it, you were like, well, that was just how it was?
I think it wasn't. I think if I had stayed in normal public high school, that I was kind of a wild kid, and always balanced it out with like a very even-keeled academic like life. So my academics never suffered, but I kind of started partying and stuff a little bit earlier than I should have. And I think had I stayed in normal high school, that side of me could have probably taken over a bit more because I would have been a bit more bored.
Yeah.
And without the kind of rigor of, and just, I mean, it was going from normal high school to university, and just being dropped into like this really intense academic environment. And also the program that I was in had very strict rules about your academic achievement, and they would kick you out of the program if you didn't achieve a certain level. And so to be in that environment, I had to kind of not go out and party all the time. And because I had curfew and things like that, it kind of reeled in the
It's kind
the
of
silly
perfect
stuff.
timing that happened. Like you say, it stretched you, and then you're in this world of, okay, like now I've got to do stuff, and I can't, fall off the, what do they say? Fall off the rails? Is that?
Go off the rails?
Go off the rails.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, go off the rails. And so were you, so physics was your thing?
Yeah, since I was around, I think, 12 when I read Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time. And
Oh, wow.
I think I was around then. I was definitely sort of 12 to 14. And I became obsessed with physics. And I have a very kind of obsessive mind anyway. Like, I get really focused on things and want to know everything. And this was also pre-internet, so it was all books,
Yeah.
And it was kind of a decision for a long time whether it would be that sort of physics, which is like astrophysics, cosmology, which is the biggest stuff, or conversely, my other interest was like the tiniest things, like how like electrons work and quantum physics. And in the end, my decision was that I preferred the really small things, and I felt, which I think is kind of a theme, is I like to have what I called like a bounded but infinite set. It's kind of a mathematical concept where it's like there are boundaries, but within those boundaries there's an infinite amount of options. I think if I have, without those boundaries, the variety like kind of paralyzes me. And so I need to have, and it kind of ties into tailoring, which we can talk about in a second, but I need to have like, a kind of, like, cage to operate in, but within that cage, like, that's where I find all of the variety.
That's interesting, because when you said about me doing so much, like that kind of really nicely puts how I feel. Like you find like a ring fence for what your thing is, but within that there's loads of things to go out. Otherwise you just get bored if it was kind of one thing.
Yeah, and you can find so many things, each little, it's hard because when you work in kind of tailoring and embroidery, there's all these awful puns. One thread, and then you realize it's like all these other, it actually is attached to all these other things, and you can follow that.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So post that, how did you end up in the UK education system, and then like why here? And you went to Cambridge, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I when I was an undergrad, I was also doing my own research that was supervised. And so I think I told you for a little while I worked at MIT, and that's where when I wanted to do quantum physics stuff, like you can either do kind of theoretical stuff, which doesn't interest me as much because I like to build things and make things, and the kind of applied version of that, where you do get to build and make things, is semiconductor physics. And so when I was at MIT, that was the research that I was doing, was in semiconductor physics, it's basically making very small circuits.
Okay.
For different applications, and kind of realized, this is the research I want to focus on. And when I came back to Texas to finish my undergrad, I was working in a lab at the university, which is the University of North Texas, in the semiconductor physics lab. And my supervisor had gone to Cambridge, and at the time, maybe it still is, Cambridge was ranked the best in the world for.
Yeah, it's either one or two. It's the fight between Oxford or Cambridge, and I don't know how they do it each, whether it's yearly or 10-yearly. But yeah, I think Cambridge might now be number one.
But specifically for that discipline, for semiconductor physics specifically, that was they were the best in the world. And I, again, I know that this sounds ridiculous, but I was a hick, I was a hayseed. Like, I didn't know what Cambridge was, but my supervisor suggested, he was like, because I was applying as I was finishing my degree, I was applying to like Ivy Leagues and stuff, and he was like, well, have you considered Cambridge? And I was like, no, I don't know what it is. And he was like, oh, well, you can, pardon me, you can finish your PhD in 3 years in the UK versus like the 7 to 10 years it takes in the US. And so I was like, oh, well, at the time that was my thing. Like starting Cambridge and finishing fast. And so I was like, oh, cool. Well, so I applied and kind of almost forgot about it until I got my acceptance letter. And then I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll move to England and go to Cambridge. And I was particularly interested in the project that, so I had visited Cambridge when I was 19 to meet with all the different project supervisors in the semiconductor physics group. And there was one project that I was particularly interested in that I didn't find anything that caught my interest in the same way in the States. So I was like,
okay.
I'll
So it was
go
like
and
a
do this one.
natural.
Yeah.
Was there any point on this journey that you, like your creative side, was that kind of niggling in the background? Were you still working on clothes, building things, like were you fully immersed in the educational side of things?
I think, and anyone can disagree with me on this, but I always find it funny that there is this split between this idea of like being a scientist and being creative, because it's one of the most, in my mind, one of the most creative things you can do is, again, kind of come up with a concept that doesn't exist in the world or identify a problem that needs to be solved. And then, particularly in the way that I was working, which is a very applied field, is that you then use your mind to make your hands create a thing to fix that problem or to, you know, materialize, make real the thing that's in your mind, which is exactly what an artist does or any other type of creative. So to me, there wasn't ever a split. It was always kind of the same thing, and it was always the same process. It was like, you know, I'll have an idea of, again, just a thing that doesn't exist in the world, like, and then how do I make that exist?
That's fascinating. So yeah, science and arts it's not necessarily divided. There's a lot of similarities in that.
Yeah, I think it particularly in the UK, and I can go on about different reasons why I think that's the case, but I think that the split is more kind of culturally enforced here. I think people really say like...
Yeah, I would say so. I think like, I don't know whether it's like the education system, but you do definitely, or you get put into that like part of, or you're creative, or you're more like education, science, maths. Yeah, it does. And actually sport as well. So like when I was growing up, I kind of got put in the sport part.
Mm-hmm.
And because I wasn't good at drawing, not in the creative part.
Yeah.
Whereas actually drama side, loved it. You know, if there was any other medium, like sewing and stuff, I did as well and I enjoyed. But if there was another medium that wasn't just drawing, so like now we have digital drawing, which I'm much better at on Illustrator, but none of that comes into play when you're a kid. And it's interesting how you get kind of put in these, like, I guess, shoehorned into, well, you're a creative or you're a, and actually, yeah, maybe we could just be a bit of everything.
Yeah, and I think particularly, this is what I was kind of avoiding going into because it can get a bit expansive, but I think when you have GCSEs and you're making kids and their parents decide at, was it 12?
Yeah.
That you're going to pick these topics that will be the rest of your life.
I know, yeah, it's bad.
When you haven't maybe even been through puberty yet. Like your brain definitely isn't fully formed. And the expectation that like, okay, now you're a geographer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. And again, I think we spoke a little bit about the difference in the American system, even at university where it's a 4-year degree. Like I, as a person with a physics major and a mathematics minor, was still taking art history, was taking psychology, was taking sports psychology. You know, we have to have this more rounded.
I think that's good about the American system. I think that's, yeah, I think that's not a bad thing. Like you say, we go too narrow too soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just creates a different type of, well, academic or,
yeah,
you know, it creates a different career path. And yeah, it's, I'm sort of loath to say one's better than the other. And
yeah.
Yeah, it definitely gives a different perspective.
Yeah, I think our system's cheaper than your system.
Because obviously in the States, you know,
it's extortionate.
It's so expensive, and I think especially if your parents are paying for it. And I mean, I was lucky the program that I went through was funded by the state, and then I got scholarships for everything else. But I think particularly if your parents want you to be a physicist and you're taking art history and they're paying a lot for it. And I imagine that they're, yeah. But anyway, yeah.
Nice. So you worked in the system, you came up north into Leeds, still working at universities. And then when did I say transition, it's not a transition because you were always being creative and doing these things, but when did you pull away from education and go into what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, I guess so. For me, being in academia was more about the research. I did a bit of teaching, but like the teaching part definitely wasn't what I liked about it. And I think a lot of academics or people who are research academics can relate to this. Is that I realized at one point that the path towards success in the field that I was in meant more teaching and more admin and applying for grants and less of being in the lab, building things, testing things, and doing the hands-on stuff, which is why I wanted to do it. It was exactly, the reason why I did it. And I kind of, forecasting into the future, saw something that didn't make me happy at all. And looking around at the people who I'd seen go through that process, a lot of them were very unhappy. And it was, the atmosphere wasn't great for a lot of different reasons. And so in 2017, I was married at the time, and my husband and I were kind of in a hobbyist way making furniture. And then we both decided to quit our jobs in the spring of 2017 and then go full-time self-employed doing the furniture stuff. And we did that for a little while. And then he decided to go back to full-time work. And during this whole time, I was making clothes for myself and doing the embroidery and everything. And we can get into the story of that as well. But when he decided to go back to full-time work, I decided to make the embroidery and like the sort of clothes side of things the focus.
The focus, yeah. Yes, let's go into that because that's like I'm fascinated with it. So you already knew how to construct garments. You've been working since a young age on clothes and making your own clothes. What was what caused the decision to then go and kind of get, I guess, is it called formal training?
Yeah, I did. So I did a level 5 diploma in bespoke tailoring. I guess I'll wind it back just a little bit. So the reason why I decided to start doing the embroidery and everything full time was I, again, grew up in Texas, and my kind of fashion sense was inspired by a lot of like Western wear stuff. And around the time, even around 2017, I was looking to kind of replace clothes that were like worn out, like my old kind of Western wear stuff. And when I was trying to buy stuff in the UK, it just didn't exist. And so I was making a lot of that stuff myself. I really liked the kind of intricate, like really embellished, like what are called like nudie suits. So it's like fully embroidered rhinestone suits that this kind of rhinestone cowboy kind of cliche. And obviously that didn't exist here, but I was doing a kind of smaller version. But I started off doing it with hand embroidery, and I was just like, this takes so long. Like, I don't know how anyone can produce these. I had assumed at the time that everything was hand embroidered. And then again, kind of because of my obsessive tendencies when it comes to like researching things, I started looking into it and found that there was a very specific type of embroidery machine that was used, which is called the chain stitch embroidery machine, to do most of the work on this. And I was like, oh, that's how you can do it a little bit faster. So it's still all guided by hand, but you're using a machine. It was, and again, maybe I'm
no, this is good. This is good.
So then I got kind of obsessed with the machines, again, because my background was very kind of mechanical. At the time, so the machines that I use are quite rare. And so then it was this whole like quest of sourcing them, and like a lot of the machines I would find would have been something that was just like these actual like barn finds. It's somebody didn't know what they had. It was just in a barn somewhere, and so I buy it cheap and then I spent I think on my first machine 6 months just like sourcing parts, which I had to find suppliers, which would be in either India or America, and then because there's not much documentation, or particularly at the time, on even how to use them, or particularly how to repair them. And so I just had to like take everything apart
Right, and figure it out.
and then figure out how to kind of restore it with some help from some different the kind of existing experts in different places.
Was that big harder? Were they harder to source because the British don't traditionally do chain stitch?
So what happened, again, this is, cut me off if I'm being boring.
No, this
so
is cool.
when digital embroidery became a big thing, which was kind of like 80s, 90s, a lot of these machines were sold off, or actually scrapped as just scrap metal,
Right.
because people thought why would anyone use these hand-guided machines when you can just put a file into a computer and it's automated, and you can have these multi-head machines that can do 8 garments at once or 20 garments at once. You just push go once you've got the files sorted. And so a lot of them were just destroyed. And so it became like a mission for me to find as many machines as I could to save them, which is why when you came to my studio, you saw I have, I think I have 17 sewing machines.
Wow.
And 5 of them are chain stitchers, and then 2 are a different type of vintage embroidery machine called an Irish embroidery machine. And a lot of them do slightly different things, but as I said before, like, it's too many machines for one person to have. But it was almost this kind of rescue mission of like, if I don't, at the time, it was like, because the craft was dying, nobody really knew what these machines were. I was like, if I don't rescue these, they'll be gone forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. And it's like keeping something alive that, like you say, traditionally could have died out.
I think too, we were kind of just talking about it when we were talking about your hat and how you have the memories of the experiences when you wore them. And I think with my tailoring and with all my clothes making, that's part of the connection I have. But with the machines too, like these are
People's,
yeah, my oldest machine is from 1890. And you think of how many hands touched that handle that I touched, and like the things that it produced, and like the memories that went into it. And it does make you feel like part of a long kind of history, like you're kind of one little component in this like spiral of DNA that's gone on for hundreds, over 100 years.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And then, so you had that, you'd got your studio, and at that point, had you done the master tailor course, or?
No. So I was doing the embroidery for a while, and mostly I was, as I was still training myself, so I was taking on a lot of projects to develop my skills in the embroidery. And then when I kind of felt like that was, like, I don't think I'll ever say that I've like completely mastered it, but when I felt at ease with it, the whole point of me doing the pivot from furniture was to make these suits. And because I had focused on the embroidery side, and was very lucky that it took off, and I was mostly doing like denim jackets, like embroidering kind of big art pieces on the back of denim jackets. And it did really well, but I realized like I don't have the willpower in myself to turn down projects. And so they keep coming in and keep coming in, but I would continually be like, this isn't the end goal for me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to be like, if I don't do something structured, which actually takes me out of a situation where I can say yes, then I won't ever
get to the goal. Exactly. Yeah.
So I did some research again, and I was looking at doing apprenticeships in London on Savile Row, and they are, I mean, it's London, so it's expensive. Mm-hmm. I lived in the north. I have an affinity to being in the north. And I came across a place called the Tailoring Academy, which is in Macclesfield, and it is a structured course rather than a kind of open-ended apprenticeship. It's a 1 year, and it has like a rigorous curriculum where you basically over the course of a year learn how to make 3 garments in the traditional British bespoke kind of Savile Row way. It's approved by the Savile Row accreditation. It's got Savile Row accreditation. I'd have to.
Yeah.
My master tailor would probably be embarrassed.
We'll figure it out and put it in the show notes.
But yeah, so it was. You worked in a studio, and you kind of, again, there was all the structure, but you kind of got to choose the fabric and the buttons and everything. But you learned, explicitly these very detailed techniques, like the hand stitching, and what angle you have to cut this specific fabric at, and all these things. And again, that appealed to my very kind of meticulous side. And in all honesty, again, I worked in academia for nearly 20 years. I went to some of what are considered the most prestigious institutions. That was being at the Tailoring Academy was hands down the best educational experience.
Oh wow, okay.
Support and encouragement and just again the rigor, everything for me was absolutely perfect.
It's fascinating because you'd think physics at Cambridge is going to be pretty hard, but also a great experience. I suppose even though they're different, we talked, maths and science goes into it. You're looking at angles of what you're cutting and the smaller, finer details of it. So tell us through then the you obviously the end game was to make these amazing suits that inspired you. Tell the listeners, because I know a little bit, because you told me about, is it Rudy? Like the grandfather?
Nudie. Yes,
Rudy, so there you
Nudie,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about how he fits kind of in the world of what you wanted to do, and then working back from that, how you ended up in Nashville and then coming back, because that's incredible.
Yeah, so the type of suits that I've described, they're actually kind of colloquially known as nudie suits. And that, again, will be if you imagine, the kind of cliche of the over-the-top embroidered rhinestone glitzy suit that a country performer might wear. And the reason they're called that is there was a tailor called Nudie Cohn who was the person who's attributed with kind of popularizing this type of suit. There's a lot of history behind that. This is the short version. There's a lot of nuance. So he was also an outsized character himself. He had these Cadillacs that were had pistol gear shifts and were covered in silver dollars with bull horns on the front.
So kind of this not crazy, but this very outlandish personality.
Yeah, and so again, he made all the suits for he was involved with all the suits with Sylvester, again, it'd be George Jones. I mean, I feel maybe for UK listeners,
throw them out there. I'm sure there's some country fans on here.
So the Robert Redford suit in Electric Cowboy, so it would have been. I might have my history a little bit wrong here, but it would have gone back as far as Hank Williams. So late 40s, 50s. I'd say the heyday was definitely kind of mid-century.
So he made these amazing suits for traditionally country singers.
Yeah, and I guess the idea was, so it was, I think, again, I might be a little bit wrong, but it was right as kind of touring musicians were it becoming a viable career.
Okay.
And so it went from being where you'd go see a country performer in some sawdust floor honky-tonk, where you're right in their face, you can smell their sweat, and to being places in auditoriums in the Ryman. And so the idea was that with all of this glitz and stuff, that the person in the very back could still see the performer, and obviously there wasn't jumbotrons and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it was the idea was that it could pull the audience in to the performer a bit more, so movie so he's considered kind of the
Godfather as such.
And again, the suits are named after him. But he had a tailor, and he did some embroidery too, called Manuel, who, so this again might be a bit controversial, so I'm trying to
say it how
choose
you
my
need
words
to say
carefully.
It.
A lot of people attribute Nudie with being kind of the face of the company that he was, which was Nudie's Rodeo Tailors, his business, and Manuel was the tailor, and then Manuel left Nudie's and moved was in LA for a while, but he established his own business, Manuel Couture, Manuel's American Designs, depending on the time period, and but he was making the same thing, like similar suits, so the embroidered rhinestone suits and shirts and things for largely kind of country performers. And then he moved from LA to Nashville, where he's been for the last 30 years. And so when I was doing my kind of research about how to make these suits and things, like I, found out about Nudie and the history there, and that he had died, and so that I couldn't possibly work with him. And then I was like, okay, who else has worked with him that I could learn from? And saw that Manuel was still alive and still making suits. And
You say still alive, like he was
he's 92.
right. So its time might have been running out.
So I got in touch before lockdown to talk about going out for to be an apprentice, and obviously lockdown happened, and then in the intervening time I also decided to go, because I was interested in the British tradition of tailoring as well, so I went and did my diploma at the Tailoring Academy. And then when that finished, there was some intervening chaotic years, and then I saw that Manuel was looking for a tailor and an embroiderer. It's two separate roles, but I spoke with his wife, who sort of does a lot of the admin and for his business, and she was like, yeah, it sounds like you can fulfill both roles as the tailor and embroiderer, and we can sort out accommodation for you and everything, so just come out to Nashville. And this was December of 2024, so just gone. And so I was at a time in my life when I was feeling a bit kind of creatively fallow, and also I don't have kids, I'm not married anymore, and I was just like, actually, I could just go do this. I'm an American citizen and a UK citizen, so it's easy for me to move back and forth between the two. So I said yes, and I sort of was like, give me a month to wrap up some stuff here, and then I'll be on a plane, and went out to Nashville.
I love that, because it's very much like my dad's always said. He was like, if you want to learn something, go to the best that you possibly can find and work under that person, and you'll never far go wrong. And Nashville, I guess, is like the center of. Well, you can educate me on this, but as a British person, I see Nashville as like the main place for country music. But Texas also has and it is quite integral to Texan people. Is that the right thing you say?
Texans are, we're very proud of being from Texas, and there's a very strong sense of place of Texas, and like one of the things about country music, which is a lot of people don't know because why would you, is that Nashville is always considered like the establishment. Mm-hmm. It's like the clean kind of like marketable version of country music. Mm-hmm. And Texas was always kind of a reaction to that. Like the genre of music called outlaw country isn't only because the people that were involved in it were outlaws. It was outlaw as a reaction to the Nashville establishment. So and outlaw country is Texas, and there's always kind of this divide, and I'm sure there are people who argue with me about this, where it's like Texas is like the real deal, like we're in the dirt, like this is like, like
okay, right,
like the gritty, grimy, like again kind of honky tonk, like real country music, and Nashville is the kind of like
well, it's like the showpiece, like
It's like the LA of country music.
That's so interesting. You can cause divide.
So going to Nashville for me, like a lot of people are like, oh, it must have been like, like so familiar to you. And I was like, it was a different universe. Like it was so far removed.
So I'm guessing if it's a little bit like the LA of country, then it's very show busy. Yeah. And like you say, not the raw roots of going into a bar and having, somebody that just grabs their guitar. And it's very much there for a reason. That's quite fascinating.
People move there. It's like, they get into like the Nashville machine, where it's like this very kind of, this like protocol to get you to be like a star in a very kind of prescriptive way. That's not across the board. Like obviously there are lots of different people, but there's definitely this idea that like you go to Nashville to become a certain type of country musician. And that's very different from what you do in Texas.
Ah.
So in a way, like kind of doing the glitzy suits and stuff is kind of going against my own roots, but I love them too. And like I always like there's a very famous country musician called George Jones who's dead, and he was from Beaumont, Texas, which is like East Texas. His story is quite similar to mine, like very well, you can learn about him, but he loved this. He was again this very kind of outsized character, like very wild, and he was known for his nudie suits as well.
Ah, okay. So tell me a little bit about like what you were doing there, and you know if there were any interesting characters that you might not have met, but you were making suits for.
Yeah, I think I have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to talk about the clients and things. So I was doing the tailoring, which is assembling the pieces to make a suit, and I was doing the embroidery, chain stitching a tiny little bit of the Irish embroidery.
What's the difference between the two?
Chain stitch, I'll try and keep it to the greatest hits. Chain stitch was like the first type of sewing machine, and
Right.
it's actually where instead of using like a needle with a point and a bobbin to make a lock stitch, which is like your normal domestic sewing machine, it uses a hook and it pulls a loop up through the fabric and then lays it down on the fabric and then pulls another loop through that
Okay.
loop. And so you get, it's almost like crochet, but on top of the fabric. That's why it's called a chain stitch. So you're literally making a chain on top of the fabric. And it used to be like I said, the only type of sewing machine there was when sewing machines were first invented, before they had motors, when it was all kind of treadle stuff. But because if one of the threads gets broken in the wrong way, it unzips the whole thing. So if you've ever opened like a dog food bag or a rice bag that has like that zip of thread at the top, that's chain stitch. So lock stitch was made to form a stitch that just didn't unzip. And the Irish embroidery is a lock stitch stitch.
Ah, okay, so it's just called Irish embroidery.
You control, it's a zigzag stitch, so it makes a kind of satiny appearance on the top. By these, you change the length of the thread, and with Irish embroidery, you adjust the length of this zigzag, so how much the needle swings back and forth with your knee while you're sewing. So you're actually controlling, so a normal domestic sewing machine these days will have a zigzag function, but you can't change the width of the zigzag, so you're locked into a specific width. But with these, you can go in and out, so you can make different shapes. And people who are good at it, which I'm okay at it, but people who are good at it, like the stuff they can create, it's because you can do so much blending and different things that you can't do with chain stitch.
Ah, okay.
So my kind of goal is to combine the two and have the benefits of each kind of work in synergy with each other. But yeah, I hope that.
Yeah, no, that answered it. That answered it. Yeah. So the people that you were making suits for, putting the suits together for, were you ever kind of? I guess you wouldn't have been daunted by the task ahead of you, because you.
A little bit, yeah, because again, the tradition that I was trained in was slightly different than the way that the suits were made.
Oh, okay. So you had to learn.
Still some differences that I was having to pick up pretty quickly. And my first project was for Johnny Cash's son.
Right. So in at the easy.
Yeah, so literally got off the plane on a Wednesday. Didn't get in. No, because delays. I arrived and it was -15 Celsius, and like
I didn't even think you could get to that.
oh god, and it was like all these delays. So I didn't even get to Nashville until 3 a.m, and then I had to go into the place where I was working and living, which was on the same property, was on a mountain in the woods, like 45 minutes south of Nashville, with like nothing around. So got there 3 a.m, and at -15, go to sleep. And that was, Wednesday morning. And then I'm in the studio on Thursday, the next day. And the first project I get handed is the Johnny Cash's son suit for his Opry debut, which is like a big deal. So he's going to be playing the Grand Ole Opry with his wife, and it's the first time, and so your Opry debut is like a big deal.
It's
which is
massive,
like,
yeah.
And so I was just like, all right, here we go. And so, yeah, I was kind of dropped into it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there were some other big clients, probably ones that I probably shouldn't name, but it was...
Is it cool though to then see it, you know, then wear it? And are they traditionally like pieces that obviously they're going to buy to keep, but I know a lot of stars will wear something once and then it'll get put in like storage. Is that different? Like, would you see your piece being, you know, the piece that you worked on being worn several times?
Like you said, it probably depends on the client a bit, but it would be like, I wouldn't be surprised to see certain clients, you know, wear them for performances and then maybe for like a red carpet or something. So I think particularly in Nashville, or if there's like, so the Grand Ole Opry just had like its 100-year anniversary, and so they've had all these events, like big, you know, kind of gala events around that, and a lot of people were wearing Manuel. Like you'd see the pictures, and like everyone's in like Manuel suits and custom stuff by Manuel.
That's so cool, because I'm guessing at some point I've been to the museum at the Opry. It's not at the Opry, it's in its main. There's a lot of clothes in there. It depends on who they are focusing on that point, but I can't remember who it was. I think it might have even been Dolly Parton when we went to look around. But yeah, they become quite iconic, don't they? Especially because of the level of detail that goes into them.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the suits that, I guess to just give like a little laundry list of his background is like Manuel made the suits for the cover of Sgt. Pepper's. One of the most famous ones is the Flying Burrito Brothers, the Sin City album, the suit with like the pills and the weed leaves and stuff, the white suit that Graham Parsons wears, which is probably one of the most famous suits of all time. Like he made that. He's credited with being the person who like told Johnny Cash to wear black, and like made that the whole like Man in Black thing originated from Manuel making him only black suits, and yeah, like it's strange again to just see how much of a life these objects have, like, and how much they kind of live in the cultural awareness, particularly obviously in country music, but like the number of times I've had people kind of approach me even before I went to work for Manuel and say like, oh, can you do me a version of the Graham Parsons suit, like these kind of iconic suits that people have in their mind, or you know the all gold lame Elvis suit, like Manuel made that, like and all, you know, they all have these, you know, sort of mythical stories behind them and everything, which...
Well, I guess, is that a big draw for you, is like having a piece that has a story behind it, and now that you get to create your own, because I imagine when you were putting the pieces together, it was all very much from top end decided down. Like now when you do a piece for a client, are you... like, how do you weave in their story? Is it you that helps that process, or do they come to you and they're like, I want this and this and this on it?
It's kind of, it can go across the spectrum with that. Like, I think a lot of times people come to me with like almost just like vibes, which I'm always happy with. Like, I get a lot of disclaimers from people being like, I don't know if this really makes sense. And I'm like, just tell me, like, if you want it to feel like the sunset in San Antonio that one time you were, you know, there for your honeymoon, like, that's fine. Like, just explain, give me all the information and we'll figure it out. I think sometimes for me in general, but particularly, is like editing things down, because it's you know, the medium that I'm working with is something that's almost always seen from kind of farish away. So, and my tendencies go towards like intricacy and detail. So I always have to pull myself out and edit it and like try and take out certain aspects. And then again, because you're dealing with people's memories, you don't want to take out the wrong memory. You don't want to be like, oh, well, I took this piece out because it didn't work. And they were like, but that was the whole point. Yeah. So it's a dialogue a lot of times. I mean, sometimes people will just be like, I like what you do your thing, and that's amazing too. And sometimes, I need a little bit more structure, because when I have too much variety, I'm like, Is
there anything you put into your designs that makes it like Kellye's, yours, that you like? Do you have? Does it? I imagine there's a little bit of a signature. I might be wrong with, it coming down the tree from, the originals that started it to those that then take it on. Do you have like a signature kind of thing that you like to put in, or?
Like to, I mean, with the work that I've done up until now, and again, I'm always kind of changing, and I think right now I'm in a point where I'm feeling a lot of big changes too, so this might not be in 6 months how things go. I always like to incorporate kind of natural landscapes into things, and so a lot of times I'll do like a framing things in almost like a wreath of local flowers, or like for Texas it'd be bluebonnets, maybe here it'd be like, more heather or something like that, and then have a scene inside that to kind of pull in something like from the local.
Yeah.
And it may even be, something that's not like, even if it doesn't really have anything to do with nature, like for me it's always nice to kind of pull in one of those elements.
I love how you did something with the Yorkshire Rose as well, didn't you? Like,
yeah, well, because we have in Texas, we have the Yellow Rose of Texas, which is this big kind of icon of Texas iconography, and then here we obviously have the Yorkshire Rose. So I work with that kind of play a lot too, where like the first shirt I did with embroidery, it was the front was these yellow roses and the back was the Yorkshire Rose, like to kind of. So yeah, I guess I do kind of use the rose a lot too. But it's funny because this predated my working with Manuel, but he's also known for using roses. So when I was working for him, I was stitching a lot of roses. So I guess you're right. Maybe it just didn't occur to me, but yeah, roses do feature heavily.
Oh, amazing. And I didn't think about this, but you like the design is there, but if somebody comes to you with an idea, are you drawing the design? You're not going out and obviously taking inspiration from maybe things that are on the internet, but the actual drawing of the designs, that happens with you as well.
Yeah, so I hand draw everything. I'll use like an iPencil and iPad a lot of the time, but sometimes I do just do pencil sketches and then.
Because you could be, I guess, could you be really good at chain stitch, but not necessarily good at drawing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people, and again, this is part of the reason why I moved away from doing the denim jackets, is because I was doing other people's designs, and you can end up being almost like a screen printer. And again, no shade on that at all. Like it's a craft and it's a technique, but yeah. And when I was talking about the changes that I'm making now, is moving more in the direction of not doing other people's designs and not. I do like those projects, but at the moment, I'd like to do more of my own work. And I think again, this was one of the big kind of lessons that I learned by working for someone else, having been self-employed since 2017 and then had this stint working, as an employee for someone else, is that it really crystallized like what I want to be doing for myself with my time. And like the kind of, again, because I went into that experience feeling a bit scattered creatively, and came out of it feeling really determined with a vision of what I want to do for myself. If I'm spending my hours working, like, and I'm not having to work for someone else, these are the ways that I want to work for myself, and these are the things I want to produce.
And that in itself, like it being in another country where, Yorkshire is not Nashville, you're carving, something into like British culture as well, because we're talking about this, how the country scene is it's still massively growing in the UK and is going like, I don't now get as many looks in my hat, like, and it's not even like a full country cowboy hat, like, but I think we go to loads of country events and it is blowing up, and I think mainstream country songs are coming into the British charts and is not seen as something completely separate anymore, which is really cool. So yeah, you're kind of, what do they call it when you're kind of leading the way? Because I guess do you know of anyone else in the country that is doing what you do?
I think there's a woman in the South somewhere who I'm friends with, Melanie, and I can't remember her surname, but she does embroidered suits too, or like, but not like tailored suits, not like kind of Savile Row tradition tailored stuff, more just like shirt, like sets.
Oh, okay.
You might have to edit that. That sounds a bit weird. But yeah, there are not many particularly when I started, I didn't know of any other chain stitchers. I didn't know of anyone even doing that type of embroidery. Subsequently, I found out that a few were kicking around, and then I think I mentioned during lockdown, loads of people got interested in it. Loads of people found machines, bought them, and then a lot of them have subsequently realized how difficult it is to learn and moved away from it. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, when I started, I was one of a handful, and now there's, many more. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people have the connection to the country music thing. So chain stitch has a lot of different kind of cultural touch points, which one of them is like bikers. So you get a lot of like tattoo artists who move into chain stitch. So all the patches on biker jackets used to be done in this specific type of embroidery. So there's like this tattoo kind of affinity to it, and then it was also like like bowling shirts where so that's chain stitch embroidery as well. So you get a lot of kind of like vintage retro kind of people, and then things like the old baseball pennants or like sports pennants that would have your team's name on it, like that would be chain stitch. And then when you had varsity jackets that have that that kind of furry, fluffy stitching, that's called moss stitch, and you also do that with the chain stitch machine.
Oh, do you?
And so it's got a lot of different like niches within this very niche thing.
Yeah.
And so people who do, people who like make banners or people who would maybe do like sign writing and stuff like that, like that's also
still tying in. And I think that's coming back. Like I have a Pinterest board that is full of everything what you've just explained when I was looking at, garments and screen printing and traditional methods. Because I think you find those pieces in vintage shops and they have been there for so long, but when you look at the detail, you just, I don't know, it's different, isn't it? It's not what we are traditionally seeing in our fast fashion that we have now. And that's kind of cool. I like that kind of old school, like now we do these vintage effects and it's like, well, you just buy a t-shirt from like the 80s and it's, it's going to have the same effect because that's what screen printing does. It just gets nicely faded and textured. So that's pretty wicked. I think it's incredible. I want to ask you, there'll be a lot of people that listen and we talk about this pivot and you just seamlessly, explained how you went from like education to where you are now, but you didn't really because it was always there at the start. And this is always a common theme with guests is they're like, but when I was little, like I did this thing, and it's almost kind of like a rite of passage, and that is life and that is part of the story. But there's some people that don't pivot to what I guess inherently is inside them that they really want to do. Has it come easy to you, and what would you say to someone who wants to do something but is like, perhaps they're in the world that you were in education, they're like, oh my god, like I've gone this route, I'm here, like, and they don't feel, because I speak to a lot of people, they're like, I can't, like this is everything I've invested, this is almost my identity. Like, would you have anything to say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it was my identity that I was a physicist. It was like doing research at the level that I was doing it was intrinsic to who I was. And it was like, not to get too like sort of psychological or philosophical about it. It was kind of like an ego death, like an identity death, where I had to spend a lot of time being like, I think I apologized almost when I would talk to people, because I used to be able to sit at dinner parties and people would be like, oh, what do you do? And I'd be like, oh, I'm a physicist. Like, what kind of research do you do? And I was doing cancer research, like I was doing biosensors for detecting cancer. And so it was like immediately you were kind of held in a certain esteem and your work seemed very worthy. And then to go from that to people being like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm an embroiderer. And to have, that the idea of, I'm not talking about my personal, I'm talking about like a cultural understanding of what that is. And especially because, crafts that are typically attributed to women's work are devalued, and to go from one to the other was really hard. And I think I probably still do it, where I'd be like, oh, I'm a tailor and embroiderer, and then if anyone's like, oh, how'd you get into that? I'm like, well, I was a physicist. Like, I put it in there. Like, it doesn't go away, And I think and part of me, I've had friends who'd be like, well, now that you're not a physicist anymore, I'm like, well, I'm always a physicist. Like, I always was. Now I'm just applying that to, like, I think of my embroidery studio and my tailoring and embroidery studio as a lab. And I still have the same mindset. And, we spoke about it before. Like, my day-to-day isn't that different from when I was working in labs. I spend a lot of time doing some of the stuff. But, yeah, it's definitely something where I had to, like, reckon with this thing that felt almost immovable. And I know that there's a lot of controversy, maybe not a lot of controversy, but there's a certain response you get when you say that you've done the artist's way. And I did the artist's way, and I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
It's essentially like a recovery program for creatives who are blocked.
Oh.
It's been around since maybe the 70s, and it definitely is of its time. And it's structured like a recovery program, like an AA type thing, but for regaining your creativity.
What is this like? Is this somewhere you go to do?
It's a book by Julia Cameron, I think is her name. And lots of people do it. Lots of people attribute it to like being able to, essentially, like if you want to save yourself, I think it's a 12-week program. I can't remember. I've done it once all the way through, and then I kind of stumbled through the first few weeks a few more times when I felt like I need a little refresh.
Yeah.
But essentially, it basically is like figure out what you actually want, prioritize it, and then like one of the things that you do is every morning you write 2 pages of just like A4 sheets of just like brain dump, called the morning pages. And it's journaling, so it does what journaling does. There's some other sort of practices about it where you just think about things in certain ways, and then you have these things where it's like artist dates, where once a week you take yourself on your own to do something to develop your art or to like refuel your creativity. So go to a museum, go to the cinema, something like that.
Wow.
But one of the main things I think that you can get out of it is, again, this sort of crystalline, distilled idea of like what it is that you actually want to be doing, and letting everything else fall away. Like, if you have, you can correct me in your experience, but when we've talked, you've often said how you have all these different ideas and stuff, and I think it's great to have all these ideas, but if you put equal effort into all of them, you're not going to get anything done, right? The one thing that you were put on the earth to do won't get done, because you're distracted by the other things. And I think that's what it helps you do. So anyway, that was part of what I had. I had a weird kind of, when I was going through this kind of like identity crisis, I guess, I had a weird period of just loads of weird, maybe I was just noticing it more, but like loads of different avenues kind of suggesting the artist's way. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'll do it. And went into it very skeptical, like this is going to be like woo-woo nonsense. And I actually thought it was quite useful. So, but I think there's lots of other ways you could approach it. But I think to answer, this is a very long answer to your question, but yeah, I think there is, if you've lived a life with a certain mindset in a certain atmosphere for a long time, it's really hard to then go, well, now, even just being self-employed. Yeah. If I'm not rambling too much, I think one of the other things that's tough, and I really hope this doesn't sound mercenary, is that you have to take stock of who's around you. Because if you've been living in like a corporate environment or an academic environment or whatever, everyone who's in that environment has a specific way of how they think you should be living, because that's the way that they live. And I'm not saying you can't be friends with them. I'm not saying, but you have to find the right people who will support your vision, even though it doesn't like.
No, I know what you mean, and I have felt it coming away from construction. Is you kind of have to rebuild, and it's almost you find your people. You have to find your people, and if you don't find your people, I think that's when you'll sink. You might go into an area and you think that this is for you, but if you don't find your people, you'll kind of let go of it, because you need those people around you to support you and to say, yeah, like it doesn't necessarily have to be directly in that field, but like for me, it's the creative community. It's people that make films, that make content, that are interested in storytelling. And I 100% agree with that, because it's a pretty lonely world to be self-employed and to go out on a limb, you know, where it might be parents, it might be spouses, you know, friends that can't see what you see, and it makes it so much harder. And then if you get into a pool of people that can see it, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, you can't be the only person who's enthusiastic about what you're doing.
No.
And I think, again, this is where I'm probably getting into some like choppier waters when I'm saying this, is I think that people, I would have been one of them when I still worked in academia, is I think that when people see, especially if someone's creative in that way and probably would prefer to be self-employed too, but they have their day job, I think there's a layer of bitterness.
Yeah.
That when they, you know, if they're working a 9 to 5 and they see you like kind of, you know, drawing horses all day and like getting to stitch them and like working with like these crazy clients and all that stuff, that they're, rather than going like, that's great for them, there may be a level of being like, I want that, but I'm locked into this.
Yeah.
And I think this may have to be edited out.
No, I think that's the case.
And doesn't mean they can't support you in other ways, but don't come to them with your heart and soul like on your sleeve, because they'll push it away.
They don't get it. Yeah, they don't get it. Yeah. And I think that's the difference between those that make the jump and those that don't. Is like there is a whole lot of bravery. You're going to this unknown world, and like anyone who is self-employed knows the ups and downs. I liken it to a roller coaster, and you get that in a job, but it's just not the same. And I think I've been reading a lot lately on like purpose, and that's to kind of keep me on the straight and narrow with like, if everything links into a solid purpose, then there are lots of things you can do around it, but you're going to be on this one route. You know, there's different vehicles to get to there. And if somebody can't see that, it's like the podcast, you know, sometimes I reach out to folks that, you know, I would love to have on the show, and they clearly don't see like what the show's about. And it doesn't work out. And I got to a point where I was like, oh, that's fine, because actually forcing that on the show is not going to work. You know, it doesn't grow this community that is wonderfully happening behind the scenes. So I think that's a great piece of advice. And yeah, I'm interested in what did you say it was called? The Artist's Way. The Artist's Way, right? Okay.
So, and she talks about that too. Whereas, like, if someone is a blocked creative, is the kind of terminology she used, that they want to keep you blocked too, because people want to keep you in the same spot that they are. Not, and again, I don't think it's malicious or whatever, but it's literally what you said. You have to find your community, which is hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard at first, and then it's easy because, you know, again, one person introduces you to another. And I think that leads into, you know, as we've talked about, where I've been super lucky is having the community in Leeds that is so supportive. I mean, I'm here because Sean
right across the way
downstairs, and I've known Sean for whatever 10 years, maybe more, probably more. And like having these people who, you know, will mention your name and be like, oh, this person does this interesting niche thing, where even if they're not necessarily into it, like if I don't know Sean's necessary opinion, like I don't know Sean's explicit opinion about chain stitch embroidery, but I know that he supports what I do.
Yeah.
And whether or not everything that I output, everything that I produce is like to his liking, he knows that I'm, you know, passionate.
There's a mutual respect as well, isn't there? Like,
I'm gonna go see him after.
yeah, no, he's awesome. He's right. It's right nice stuff.
Right nice stuff.
Yeah. Shout out to Sean. Yeah.
Those people like that, you know. I just feel really lucky to be in the community of people that are so supportive, and be in a place where you have a supportive community. You know, I lived in London for 4 years, and it wasn't really like that. It was more competitive and gatekeepy, and
we always say there's a north-south divide, and it's very. My brother comes up from, but even Birmingham, which is right in the middle, and he's like, people up here, like they ask you how you are when you go shopping. I'm like, yeah.
About like the Midlands, and you start getting really nervous, and you get like every time we stop at a petrol station or something, you'll come back and be like, everyone's so rude, and you're like, yeah, we're in the South. But you know, I lived in Cambridge for 8 years, and then London for 4, so I was down there for 12 years, and definitely coming up to Yorkshire, I was like, oh, this feels more like what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Texas, if you're, you know, in a certain way is one of the friendliest places in the world. Obviously, gun crime, everything else, racism, etc. aside. But yeah, it was very much a culture shock to when I moved to Cambridge. I didn't expect. I'd never been around people that acted like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably the prestige there and a little bit of ego thrown in. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I had to realize was that, like, being polite in Texas is being friendly, is talking to strangers, and being polite in Cambridge and in parts of the South is giving people their space.
Yeah. It's polar opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, it took me a long time
To get there.
to sort of realize that people weren't being rude. They thought they were being
Yeah.
rude. I thought I was being polite. It was just a clash of, like, a literal cultural clash.
Yeah.
But
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. You've been awesome.
well, I'm really, really honored to be here, and, like, I really appreciate you taking the time.
I know your story is absolutely awesome, and I think so many women will get so much from it. Well, anyone, to be fair, that's listening. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
Awesome.